Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update number 204 for Monday, 17th of November, 2025. I hope you're all well. I hope you've had a good weekend. I hope you're ready for an interesting week ahead in the markets. If those of you are here in the live room, whether you be here on the Zoom call or on the live stream, just if you can confirm that you can hear my voice and that you can see the slides, it would be great to know the technology is working in our favour. If you're joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is literally just that. It is me flying through as much as I can share with you in the next 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within FX markets, looking at some charts of interest that you might want to add to your watch list, and then a look at the live markets. It is not a signal service, it's not trade recommendations, it is just me sharing my view with you, which may be of relevance or help to you in your own trading and analysis and investment. As always, you are very welcome here, but just remember that you're always responsible for your own trading decisions. If you want some more education this afternoon, I will be doing the Active Trade Monday Market Matters webinar at 2 o'clock London time. The education element will focus on how to trade intraday reversals. You can join that. You can either sign up on their website or use that QR code there, and that will take you towards the ability to register for that. You're welcome to join us. And as always, if you want a little bit of help and support in your own trading, you are welcome to join the Trader Accountability Group and the TAG, which is all about helping traders build discipline, accountability, and consistency in their trading. It's either bit.ly VTB tag or once again that QR code, or if you've got questions or comments, just drop me a note if you want to have a chat about it. Okay, let's dig into the analysis. Okay, so what's this you're looking at if you're new to trading or new to joining us? This is just parts of clipped out of my own weekly analysis that I do most sort of Saturday mornings. Just looking to identify where's the strength, where's the trends, where's the momentum within FX indices and commodities market. So what is this telling us? Well, it's telling us we are into week 47 of the year for the 17th of November. Where's the strength? Where's the weakness? Well, Swiss franc remains top of the pile with euro in second place. Not a massive shock, but we might want to keep a watch on the Swiss franc dailies. I wonder if there's something afoot there. At the other end of the pile, the bottom end of the pile, well, we still have Kiwi dollar and, of course, Japanese yen sort of sat there quite, well, not necessarily happy at the bottom, but they are sat there, okay, sat there around away. Where do we see dollar and sterling? Dollars are kind of in that sort of fair to middle of the pack at the moment. All right, when we'll look at the charts in a moment, we'll see that in terms of certainly dollar index, we're still just kind of butting up against the sort of 100 number, okay, on the dollar index, and probably waiting for some of the US data to come out this week. We've also got a couple of big earnings in terms of Nvidia and one or two others. All of which will have undoubtedly a bit of an impact. Close to home, sterling sits at number 5, okay, towards the sort of lower end of the pack. It has been a rather, let's say, rather mixed few days for trading sterling. Plenty of volatility. Some of that volatility brought on by sort of, economic volatility or brought on by economic data. Others brought on by sort of, let's just call it political instability. None of which is particularly favourable when we are what is that sort of less than 10 days away from the sort of autumn statement, the budget. That's a week on Wednesday. So yeah, sterling is what sterling is. Now, if you look at it over since markets opened yesterday, okay, last night, well, it might show you that it's done okay, but invariably that's, I think, more to do with some of the others sort of drifting lower. Okay, it was a bit of a mixed session for trading sterling. Okay. Sort of this morning, but when I look at the kind of individual currencies there, okay, in terms of the individual sterling currencies, the vast majority of them are on the selling of the STAM, okay, in terms of that's still a kind of a bearish hue to that. When I look at some of the kind of indices and commodities, what we see is that quite a bit of the momentum has gone bearish. Russell, okay, is a tactical short for me. DAX remains tactical short. FTSE remains a strategic buy, okay, and we'll look at that in a particular moment. ASX, okay, has gone tactical short. Kind of interestingly, sort of, the VIX is well, it finished last week beneath 20, but it's still kind of on the weekly and the daily bearish by my model. And what we do have is we see that Bitcoin, okay, has gone a strategic short there, which kind of leads us on nicely to the first of the charts of interest, which we'll look at in a particular moment. So kind of an interesting week ahead, all right. So the reopening of the US data, we're expecting to sort of see the kind of September jobs date for the US later on this week. There'll be more comes out as basically the US opens up. I think it's going to be an interesting week, ladies and we've got, I think, FOMC minutes on Wednesday evening, as well as some UK data as well. So yeah, we're in for an interesting week. Okay, so what I also do is put up a few charts of interest, okay, just things that, the price action is of interest, you might be able to learn from it. You might want to add it to your watch list, just to see what's going on. So this is the weekly chart of Bitcoin. Um, I don't consider myself a crypto specialist, okay, but a good chart is a good chart, and that's what we like to see here. So, in terms of the weekly chart, why is it up here? Why are we interested? Well, it's not unsurprised that we've had such a good move there, okay, over the last 18 months or so. And what has been of particular interest to me is that just look at how price has reacted to the red 50 weekly period moving average. Okay, it has acted as real good support, certainly over the kind of last 18 months. But what we did is we pushed to those highs around about 126, and we have since come off there. Okay, kind of like three pushes to a high, and we have rolled over. And so now what we see for me is we have actually last week, we have closed beneath that 50 period moving average, which has acted as such good support over the last 18 months. And we've also closed beneath that big round number of 100,000. So my question now starts to become, okay, do we get a basically push back up? And if we do, does that kind of 50, okay, does the 50 and the 100, do they flip from being support? Now, 100 has been, it's been a pivotal number. Does it flip from being support to being resistance? And do we just get a push up before we get another leg down towards maybe that kind of sort of 80,000 area? All right. So we're at, what I would look at as a pivotal point. Okay. I'd look at as a kind of an interesting a place for me to get interested. I'm always interested in areas and zones where markets, are likely to make a decision, and then let the market play its hand, and then just try and ride the trend after it. I'm not trying to be a smart arse, okay, or predict what's going on. I'm just identifying good areas where markets might need to make a decision. And I personally believe that Bitcoin is there at that moment. It's in this area where, as I said, I think we flip up and then we look at does it push, in which case you have to look at new highs, or does it flip it from being support to resistance, in which case do we drift lower? Okay, so you might be watching that for the over the next couple of sessions. Next one here, this is silver. Okay, silver on the weekly chart, and once again, all right, we have had listen, an uptrend which was scrappy but continuing to make highs, but then price starts to go parabolic here. And as I say to traders and investors, once price starts going vertical, if you're already in it, well then fair play to you, tighten up your stops and ride it what you can. If you're on the sidelines, stay on the sidelines, because invariably by the time you look to buy, you'll probably buy the actual top. And if you just sat watching it, well then basically, what can you learn from it? And what we can learn from it is that, once price goes vertical, nothing can ever stay vertical forever. And what I see on silver now is, we've got $50. We have printed what is now, I look at, as a kind of a double top there. Okay, a double top there, on the weekly chart at above $50. And so I look at, well, all right, does that double top is normally a reversal pattern, but just because it is after that doesn't mean I'm just loading on a short. I would be starting to look at, how does price react around about 50? Okay, can it stay above it? In which case, well, maybe we drift sideways. But if it can't, well, then I wonder if, if we can't get beneath six, hold or keep above 50, well, then actually do we start to then break these kind of this area around about 46, and then once again a kind of an inflection point, because I would expect the kind of the weekly 20 to be at this kind of fractal here and there. So I'm looking, I'll watch this over the next couple of weeks, and I think some of this will also come out of the data out of the US, the basically some of the big earnings like Nvidia, etc. Some other geopolitical elements going on, which will have an impact on that. So it's good, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. And as I said, you might want to add that to your watch list just to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks. Then, of course, yeah, we've got the big boy this week. Okay, so Nvidia, all right, it's their earnings delay this week. Couldn't really not talk about them. Okay, and yeah, what can we say about Nvidia? Well, why is it of interest? Well, listen, once again, it has been in a good trend there. Okay, excuse my scruffy drawings, but you get the idea. We had that kind of double top there into the sort of the tariff tantrums. But the interesting thing is that we came down to $100, put in that big engulfing candle, all right, and then basically we never looked back, did we? We had a couple of little squabbles, I would probably say, okay, over the last month or two. But what we did, we made it up to $200. But as you can see, we kind of rejected it, didn't we? We kind of rejected it. And now the reason I'm of interested is of course, we've got earnings going on, and where we are now is I see us kind of, where you can see the pre-market of 180, last week's close 190. I look at us being kind of sat on kind of like $180 with that weekly 20 period moving average, okay, which we haven't closed beneath since sort of April, May time. My view is if those numbers are good, all right, we're sat in between 180 to 200. If the numbers are good, well, then I suspect what happens is, kind of the giddiness returns, and then we see basically price pushing up, and I'd want to see price pushing back up to those highs that we've seen at sort of kind of 210. But if the numbers are poor or the market interprets them poorly, well, then I look at, well, does that 180, 200 level, 180 20 period moving average, does that have enough to hold as support? I mean, and if it does, well, then I see a bounce from 100 to 200. But if it doesn't, and if it breaks it and it cracks it, well, then you're looking firstly around about 165, and then you have to wonder, well, actually, could we be down to sort of the kind of the 150 area if we crack and fall? So, as I said, it's Nvidia's, it's caught between 200 and 180, and everyone, the world and his wife will be watching those numbers later this week. Okay, as I said, if they're good, I think giddiness returns. If the numbers are poor, and listen, I'm not entirely sure why Mr. Wang would ever sort of pump out poor numbers. Okay, he's got form, but as I said, the world and his wife will be watching, and if those numbers aren't great or the market sentiment isn't great around it, I do watch that kind of weekly 20 at the 180 number and see if they can hold, and if not, look out below. And then the final one of the charts of interest for this week before we switch to the live markets, JP Morgan, okay, weekly chart here. Once again, we have had a great trend out of this, okay. Yep, yes, we did have the kind of the sort of tariff tantrum, but then that affected everybody, but it still stayed above $200, and we reclaimed the 50 period moving average and worked our way back up there very nicely. But I'm interested in this because what we printed last week was, that is a weekly bearish engulfing candle. That is a weekly bearish key reversal candle. We pushed to a new high, but we closed beneath the low of the previous week's candle. That's what makes it a key reversal candle. You might also say, well, Paul, that is also as part of a double top. This is the second leg. And once again, a little bit like Nvidia, we're sat just above $300, and the weekly 20 period moving average. So, if Nvidia's numbers are poor, and the market sort of kind of loses all interest, or has a little bit of a panic, I think I think it generally could be kind of like a little domino effect, and knock all sorts of stocks, including JP Morgan. So once again, I'm looking at, well, hang on a minute, does the 20 and 300 act as support? Okay, does it act as support? In which case, I'd want to see us attacking those highs at 320. But if it doesn't, and if, let's say, those American jobs numbers are not great, maybe the Nvidia numbers aren't great, maybe there's just a general turn, a sourness in the sentiment. Well, then, you know, do those two levels hold, and or do they break, and then bang, 290? Then I'd say probably down towards 280. That's what we look. We've had a great run there on JP Morgan, haven't we? But as I said, this is the reason why I have these kind of charts of interest. It's at a point where it's going to have to make a decision, and or it's more likely to make a decision. And so, I want to watch that to see if there is an opportunity for us from that. So, yeah, JP Morgan, add that to your watch list, see how that plays out this week. All right, there, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, we fly through those. Let us switch across to the live markets. So, if you'll just bear with me for a moment, we'll switch across and look at them. So, just please bear with me for a moment, and we'll move across. Okay, so I'm hoping you can still hear me. I'm hoping that you can see some of the charts now. This is a profile I have of indices here. So I've got the Dow on the weekly, NASDAQ on the weekly, SP 500 on the weekly, Russell, oil, DAX, the Nikkei, and the FTSE there as well. Okay, so just the whole idea to give me a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on. I'm just going to make sure we're all across on the weeklies. Listen, oil dull, hanging around, okay, hanging around kind of 60, not too exciting, okay, there at the moment. I'm kind of more interested in what's going on in those American indices. If we look at the Dow, you know, last week, we've printed a big bearish reversal pin bar, okay, a couple of weeks after printing another one. Now, it's kind of strange because, as I said, we've got the opening of the sort of the US government, so there'll be data coming out. How is that data going to impact? What effects that going to have on? But when I look at that, to kind of the Dow there, at the end of last month, end of October, we had a little bit what I'd call a trend there. A little bit of pin bars. We fell away. We bounced beautifully off here. This is the daily chart. Bounced beautifully off the 50. 50 has acted as really good support there. See, and it ran up nicely until it didn't, and we dropped away. And now I'm looking at, okay, all right, is there going to be support around about kind of 47,000 on that daily 50? We're going to go down and test that, and then you have to look at, well, okay, right, if I look at a kind of scenario on that, I do look at, well, okay, do we get a bounce and a move like that? All right, that's what I'm looking at. If as I said, if the data later this week, okay, is not great, okay, or as I said, the sentiment sours, that's what I'll be looking at. Alternatively, maybe that 50 acts as support again, all right, and we work away. So I think that kind of, in that, as I said, that's only around about 47,000 on these charts. That's what I'm going to be looking at in terms of Dow, and seeing how does price play out there. Because if I look at that compared to, let's say, the Russell, I would say the Russell has already kind of, I would say the Russell has kind of peaked. This is the daily Russell. We've kind of had that double top there, right? Double top there during October. We're now beneath the 50, a 50 which acted as support, but we're beneath it and we've flipped it. And now, if you can see that, the 20, which had acted as support as well, it flipped it there last week. Okay, this is PO20. The 20 is rolled over. We're beneath the 50. I wonder whether we get basically a kind of a move back up to this area, to an indecision, a decision point, an inflection point before a move lower. So, is it the fact that the Russell is leading us lower at this moment? That's what I'm waiting to see. That's what I'm watching to see this week. Okay, and as I said, we've got formal economic data, we've got earnings coming out, and then we've got just general market sentiment. So, let's watch and see how that plays out. Looking a little bit closer to home, DAX here on the weekly chart. Okay, so you know, it's just gone in that range. We've had a false breakout a few weeks ago, and we continue to sort of just work our way. We're working our way just a little bit lower here. If we go in the daily chart, that was a false breakout with an evening star, and the price action hasn't exactly been glorious. But once again, the daily DAX bounced off its 200 period moving average. Do we come down there again, and do we bounce off it, or do we flip it? This kind of level here, this kind of, we've seen support here around about, what's that about? In that kind of 23,600 to 23,500 area on these charts, okay. But I think we drift our way lower there, and then we have to look at what kind of decision do we make there. That's what I'd be looking at with the DAX. If I look at FTSE, FTSE has been in a great trend, okay, in a kind of post-tantrum trend, right? Once we broke above those earlier yearly highs, we have worked our way up. Last week we printed, I would look at that as a bearish reversal pin bar, but one candle doesn't end a trend, all right, normally. When I go down to the daily, I would look at that as it's an evening star. We had a kind of false breakout with an evening star, but if the 20 continues to hold, remember that we've still got a couple of hours of the session here. I'll be looking at, but if not, well then we're down to that kind of 50. And of course, as I said, the statement is a week on Wednesday, and whilst most FTSE companies, they are I would call them GBP negative in terms of that most of them make their profits overseas, okay, more than the UK. Nonetheless, if the tax regime and the general sentiment in the UK is weak, well then that could have an impact on the FTSE. So personally, we've got UK data coming out this week. All right, I personally think we sort of start to drift. We drift just a bit lower in the run up to the autumn statement. That would be my view at this particular moment. Just look at a couple of the commodities. Boom, gold. Okay, so we looked at that double top on silver. You might say there's a version of that on gold there. Okay, last week we really did rally up, but we kind of fell down. Nonetheless, we're still above 4,000, aren't we? We're still above 4,000 on the weekly chart. If I go down to the daily chart, yeah, you've heard me talk about this before. We've got that big round number at 4,000. The daily 20 is coming down. The daily 50 is coming down. The price is coming down. I wonder if we sort of drift our way lower to 4,000, and then we get that coil of all of you get the coil where you've basically got price action, moving average, big round number, all coming together in front of those FOMC minutes and Nvidia earnings and stuff, and perhaps maybe some Trump China sort of talk. I wonder if we drift into there, okay, and then basically the end of the week we kind of is a catalyst of making a decision on where we go. Remember, gold has been the uncertainty trade, so if everything goes a bit Pete Tong, well, we pump higher. If everybody's happy and giddy, maybe gold starts to drift lower. So as I said, we're getting into a zone where it's likely it's an inflection point to make a choice and stuff. So we'll watch it. As I said, we looked at silver before, didn't we? It's that double top there, okay, at 50. Okay, the daily chart there, okay, that's a really nice double top. As I said, we're holding above 50. Can 50 act as support? If not, bang. I think we go back to the 50 period moving average, which would be around about just under 40, just around about 49. So 4-hour chart, yeah, see, even the 4-hour chart, that second part of the double top there, that is there's a head and shoulders pattern there on the 4-hour chart, down at the 50 period moving average, just above the 50. Is that going to hold as support? Okay, is that going to hold as support? If that breaks, then you're definitely looking at $50 to move towards. As we said as well, we also looked at Bitcoin. As I said, Bitcoin is it's beneath 100,000, it's beneath the 50. My natural view is that we drift our way back up into that zone, up to that 100. Look at on the daily chart, the 100, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, was acting as great support. My question now is, does that support now become resistance on that big round number? Okay, does it come up to it and then work its way lower from that? That's what I'd be looking at there. Now, of course, we've looked at Bitcoin, we've looked at gold, we've looked at silver, a little bit of oil there. An awful lot of those things also have an impact because of what's going on with the US dollar. So let me just from it was a bit of a busy morning this morning on dollar. Okay, so what I've got here is my dollar profile. So we've got Aussie dollar on the daily, Kiwi dollar on the daily, Euro dollar on the daily, dollar Canadian on the daily, pound against dollar on the daily, dollar against Swiss on the daily, dollar against Japanese yen, and the dollar index on the weekly chart there. If look at the dollar index, as we said, the weekly chart, we had that double bottom, FOMC, got above the 20, which had acted as resistance, flipped it up to 100, okay, nice pin bar, and I've just drifted a little bit lower from that, as you see here on the daily chart. Daily chart hit the 200, hit the 100, put that pin bar in there, and we drifted back to the 20. But if you look at that for the last couple of days, I'd say, it's wouldn't necessarily say exciting. Remember, we just talked about that with was it gold, etc. I wonder if price is all starting to coil up, where we're getting the kind of the moving averages and the price moving towards a point later this week where we get, as I said, FOMC minutes and video earnings, a few other bits of data come out, and we've this is a kind of little bit of a calm before the storm. And then basically that data will give us a catalyst for the next move. And I wonder if that's what we see there with the dollar. Okay, that's what I would. That's what I'd be looking at. That's what I'd be. That's what I'd be working on. Yeah, with that, that's what I'd be kind of watching out for. As usual, let's finish with sterling as well. So I was trading a bit of sterling this morning. Kind of interesting session, kind of especially after the sessions of last week. So what have I got here? Cable on the daily, Euro sterling, pound Aussie, pound Canadian, pound yen, pound Swiss, pound Kiwi, FTSE. Okay, so what's going on with cable? Let's have a look. Going on to the weekly chart. We came back and tapped towards 130, but we have stayed above the weekly 50. See how it's acted as support there? Okay, it has acted as support. I wonder if we just basically tighten up there, over the next week or so in front of the budget. The daily chart, as you can see, we pushed down towards 130. We've whopped up, and you might not see it. We've had an awful lot of volatility these last week or so, but it has been basically just both a bit of up and down there. Okay, so if the 4-hour chart, look at that 4-hour chart, you're getting support. I would see that support off the 4-hour 50. Can you see that? Okay, it supported it there. And you really were caught between what's that, about 131.10, 131.10 and you might say 131.10 and 132.20. Okay, but most of it has been kind of 131.10 to 131.80, I'd say, for most of the last week. And is that a case of everything just, as I say, coiling up in front of the open statement, and us just having days where basically you can see there's lots of wicks because of, as I said, not only economic data but also political instability. There's been all sorts of shenanigans going on there that we're seeing. Not unsurprisingly, okay, even with that, pound has still managed to strengthen against yen. That's not a shock. Pretty much everything has managed to strengthen against yen. Yen has been, there's a reason the yen has been bottom of the STAM for a good long time. Interestingly, pound against Swiss franc. If we look at this on the daily chart, that for the last couple of months, that has been, sterling weakness, Swiss franc strength. But I said, I wonder if we might want to look at the Swiss franc dailies. Okay, I wonder if there's a case of some sort of shenanigans by the SNB or others in on that. Okay, so the trend has been down, but I wonder over the last day or two on the 4-hour chart whether we're kind of maybe there's a bit of a shift, and that might be a Swiss franc shift more so than a sterling shift. Pound against the condols. If we look at that into November, pound against the Aussie, pound against the New Zealand dollar, pound against Canadian dollar. All right, just nothing really to get excited. If you are, let's say, a trend trader for swings, okay, nothing exciting really there. If you're a range-bound trader and you have the ability to adapt, well, then fair play to you. Well done. And if we look at euro sterling has been in that uptrend, but we're up to kind of 88. All right, we're sort of up to 87, 87.50, up to 88. if we look at here, just, there's lots of wicks to the north, isn't there? Lots of wicks to the north. And it doesn't mean you can't push higher. Okay, certainly you might say, well, actually, Paul, hasn't it done three drives to a high? You might say that. But there's a case of, last week's, okay, that Friday candle was a real kind of a real sort of bearish reversal candle. In that 4 hour chart, you go, there you go, the 4 hour chart, when we had sterling weakness at the start of the session, then we kind of a little bit of profit taking, but this week has just kind of there's been a little bit of a move lower, and I think that's more just euro weakness across the board, more so than any indication of sterling strength. That would be my particular view. Okay, there, ladies and gentlemen, let's draw it to a close there. Okay, I hope you found that useful. As I said, I'm just flying through as much as I can fit in over the half an hour, but nonetheless, I hope that's given you a little bit of help. I hope that's given you a little bit of insight that you can utilize in your own trading. As always, I wish you the best of success in your own trading endeavors this week. It's going to be an interesting week, so make sure you're on top of the news flow. Make sure you're on top of the risk management. Make sure you understand the order flow. Have a fabulous trading week, everybody, and I will speak to you soon. You're very welcome, Christina. Thanks for joining us.